It's once again a great honor for me to share my research with such a brilliant audience. So, as Dr. Arvind Gupta introduced, I'm sorry that the spellings in this are wrong, Buddhist temples and Buddhist. So, Buddhist temples and monasteries in the Chinese capitals. For this talk, I have selected just 4 capitals: Luoyang, Nanjing, Xi'an and Beijing, because the topic is too wide. When we look at the Chinese temples and monasteries, and we have something in our mind, the way, the styles in which Indian temples are built, we have to be sure that the Chinese temples and monasteries are built in a totally different style and manner. When you look at a Chinese temple or a monastery, it doesn't look much different from any palace there, because they were actually built by the emperors because of many reasons. Number 1 was to receive monks. When the Buddhist masters began going to China, whether they were from India or from Khotan or from Kushan Empire, but whosoever they were received overwhelmingly by the Chinese emperors, and they gave them all sorts of facilities. They were so fascinated, they wanted to listen to them. Even sometimes they built temples inside the palaces so that they could spend enough time with the Buddhist monks. So, because of this, the Chinese temples and monasteries are the most splendid cultural relics. They preserve the best, I think, of the cultural relics in China. Although so much has been destroyed, I'm coming to that how many temples were destroyed over the time, but whatever remains there is unparalleled. So, when we look at the Chinese temples, it's not just their architecture, but they are a very valuable source for information on sculpture, painting, literature and folk customs also. When we look at a Hindu temple and a Buddhist temple, one of the main differences that I see is that in Buddhist temple there is equal emphasis to wisdom. They are not just abodes for offering prayers or chanting sutras or that. Again, there is a reason, because initially the history of building these monasteries in China goes back to receiving the monks. So the emperors wanted to give them the best of the facilities to accommodate them so that they could stay and also translate the sutras. So wherever you go in the Buddhist world, you will see that these monasteries are both, I would say, the places of Jnanodaya and Dharmodaya. Not just Dharmodaya, they are not just places of Dharma, but also Jnana, because they preserve the scriptures so well. And this is the reason why we have discovered large number of, although the monasteries on the Silk Route are destroyed, and whatever has been discovered is so fragmentary, but still it's amazing to find all these manuscripts from those monasteries, because the Indian teachers, masters who were going with the manuscripts, staying there and working on them, translating them, copying them, and also people initially started coming from China in search of Buddhist wisdom, and they used to come to the monasteries in Central Asia, in Xinjiang region, the modern Xinjiang region of China, for example, to Khotan. So Khotan was one of the most important centers of Jnanodaya, the monasteries in Khotan. Another very interesting point is to be noted is that the letter C, although people pronounce and write it differently, either it is written with double SU or double SI, but it is C, maybe I cannot pronounce it so well. So is was the letter used both for a government office and also for a monastery. Because a monastery was just second to the imperial palace. It was higher than a government office. So it enjoyed that status. Another point to be noted is their setting in the mountains. In India also you will see that many of the temples are built on hilltops. There are many reasons, we cannot talk all these in detail. So mountains play a great role, giving a beautiful setting, a calm and peaceful atmosphere to the temples, to the monasteries, where monks could stay and work. Not only pray, but also translate the sutras. For example, when Xuanzang went back to China, and the emperor wanted him to stay in the city, the first of all he said, no, I don't want to live in the city. I want to be away from the noise of the city, so that people don't disturb him. So they were the I think non-disturbing zones for the monks also. For example, there is a Tanzhe temple in Beijing. I'm going to show you a few photographs from there. There is another temple that is far high. It's the mountain setting, the beautiful trees, the pine trees, the cypress trees are there. So the other way, some of the mountains became famous because of the temples there. For example, Wutaishan. In India we have 4 places of pilgrimage, Char Dham we call it. So similarly in China we have 4 major places of pilgrimage, and Wutaishan is one of them. There is one that is dedicated to Manjushri, there is another that is dedicated to Samantabhadra, so like this. I would like to just show you briefly the history of China and how these these cities were established as capitals in China, and how early they began to be established. The 4 that I am going to talk about, one is Luoyang. You can see it starts from 3rd century BC. And then it's near Xi'an, and then next is Chang'an. Chang'an is actually the modern name is Xi'an. So its history goes back to 3rd century BC. Then they keep on shifting from Luoyang to Xi'an and to Nanjing, and then to Beijing. So it is just a brief you can say description of how these cities were established as the capitals, they used as the capitals in China. Finally, it is Beijing that is the modern capital, we all know. When we go to Beijing, it's a modern city. But when you visit the temples or the monasteries, you'll see the faith of the people. How they feel, how they behave, how they get solace, how they offer prayers, and how dedicated they are. So it's sometimes when I look at their ways of offering prayers, I say these are the reflections of their faith. How they offer incense, huge size of incense they offer, and so, first of all, let me say a few things about Luoyang. Luoyang, as you know, I told in my earlier talks also that when the 2 Buddhist scholars, Sanskrit scholars, reached Luoyang, the then capital of China, Kashyap, Matang and Dharmraksh, at that time the first monastery was built, and there is an inscription. The inscription is from 67 AD, and it gives all the details that how they were received and what kind of monastery was built for them. First of all, when the Chinese started building such monasteries, the focal point of a temple or a monastery was a stupa, because the presence of Buddha was the most important for the monks. even the monks who were traveling from abroad or the monks in China, because by 3rd century there were a number of people who had become monks and nuns. So first of all, they started building pagoda at a focal, at the center, the focus of this monastery or temple, following the Indian system. But but the other halls for the monks to live, for them to give sermons, for enshrining Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. So there were many halls were added to these monasteries. It depended on the translation of sutras also. For example, when the sutras on related to the philosophy of Amitabha, then there were halls for worship. Special halls were built for having a statue of Amitabha where they could offer their prayers. So the structures began like this. The plan began like this with the pagoda, but later on they started building other halls, the main hall of worship in the front, and then pagoda went into the just behind that, and the other halls were built around the stupa. But only by the 6th, 7th century, there was a monk who prepared a blueprint for construction of temples, and then he moved the pagoda to a side or the back side of a monastery, and they had a. They were very much interested in giving a good layout and also adding the nature into the planning of a temple. So I talked about the Kashyap, Matang and Dharmraksha, and then there was a Chinese emperor who proclaimed himself to be a Buddhist believer. As soon as he proclaimed himself to be a Buddhist believer, he built a temple inside his own palace. Then what happened from time to time, that for example there was an epidemic in Loyang. Then these monks were specially invited to, because they were going to China, they were curing people with medicine and also using charms. It happened during the war times also, when there was so much misery among the warriors, among the soldiers. Then they used to they invite these monks. So when there was an epidemic in Loyang, then a monk was invited, and he brought some medicines and also chanted some charms, and then he cured the emperor also. There is another very famous monk. His name is Jiva. He looks like a Vaidya. The Ayurvedic doctor, you can say, and he cured the Chinese governor at that time, so they were very impressed. Another point was theology, astrology, astronomy, etc. All these sciences, when they started reaching China, they were much impressed by this, and again the same story, that the monks were invited. Something very interesting is that there was a monk, his name is Anshikao, and he was from Persia, and he went to China, settled down there and translated a number of texts, and he was appointed as Rajaguru. In Chinese they are called Bushis. So there is a history of monks being appointed as Rajguru. Somebody I think can collect all this material and do a research paper on this, that how many Buddhist masters were appointed and why in China. Another point that impressed the Chinese was ordination ceremonies. When people started becoming monks and nuns, so there were special arrangements made for ordination of the Chinese people there, and special halls were built. Even emperors, empresses, even in Japan there is a history about a monk. His name was Nanjing, and in the 8th century, during Nara period, Emperor Shomu himself and the queen herself were waiting to be ordained, to be initiated, and they were waiting for him, and he was trying hard for traveling from in China to Japan, and the sea route, was not that comfortable, and it was very difficult for him. He tried 13 times, and finally when he reached the 13th time when he reached Japan, finally successfully, then by the time he had become blind. The journeys were so difficult. There is history, as I said, that so many monks were traveling from the Gangetic Plain, from Western India, even from Gujarat, and especially from Kashmir and many places. So I'm not going into the details. Another reason of building these temples was declaring that some of the emperors, they declared. First emperor who declared himself as Devaraja, his name is Shihu, and he did this with the help of a monk. His name is Buddhishinga. Devaraja. What is the meaning of Devaraja? In India, the kings used to rule as an incarnation of Vishnu, the Lord Vishnu, because Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Shiva is the annihilator or destroyer. So Vishnu is the most responsible deity for preservation, for promotion, for taking care, for ruling. So in Southeast Asia also this concept became very popular, but in China it's rare that a king rules as a Deva, Devaraja. So this monk, Buddhishinga, he was so important for the Chinese that when he used to enter the court, they used to give a standing ovation. And the courtiers, the crown prince himself used to accompany him to enter the court. After Luoyang, we come to Nanjing. Nanjing became a capital around of the Eastern Qin dynasty in 4th century. When there was war, people were thrown into endless suffering. There was so much turbulence. There was so much disappointment. People were feeling very bad. Then what they do, they resort to something that gives them solace, that gives them peace of mind. So when there was so much suffering, then they put hope into the next life and advocated Buddhist preachers. So Nanjing also became a center of Buddhism, and a large number of monasteries were built. In Luoyang also, I forgot to tell you that there were so many monasteries built, but only 1 or 2 remain there. The Pomasa, the White Horse Monastery. Others were all destroyed during wars, but when they were destroyed, one of the emperors, he was so sad about it, and people collected the legends, the stories of the temples and monasteries that were built there, and that is the most important source, most valuable source of information about the temples of Luoyang. So now I'm talking about Nanjing. Nanjing began in the 4th century during the Eastern Qin dynasty, and during the Sui dynasty many monasteries were built. During the Tang dynasty also, China was united, and financially, economically it was flourishing, and that is the best period, as we say in India, Gupta period to be the golden period in Indian history. Similarly, Tang period in China and Nara period in Japan are the golden periods in history. And during this period, the most splendid monasteries were built, the most important works were translated, large number of monks reached China. They were invited from India and from other places also. There is a history about monks traveling from Vietnam. There was a monk, his family was from Central Asia. They were traders. They came to India, settled down here, and then they went to Vietnam for business. And from Vietnam, there was a delegation going to China, going to Nanjing, and that monk also joined them, and he became so famous in China. So people were traveling from India, from Central Asia to India, to Southeast Asia, to China. There is a history about the people traveling from Funan also, from Champa also. Champa was also a great center of Buddhist learning. According to the Chinese history, it was so famous that once a Chinese emperor sent a military mission to China to procure Buddhist texts. They took 1357 or some number of the Buddhist texts from Champa, and Indian dance and music also was taken from Champa to Japan also. It still survives there, so I'm not going into the details. So that way, Tang and the Sui and Tang dynasty, when China was financially very strong, a number of monasteries were built. Even in Beijing, I'll show you some monasteries that I have visited in Beijing. Beautiful monasteries, so quiet, so calm, and full of scriptures. And during the Liao dynasty also, many monasteries were built there, so I'm not going into all these details. So, as I said, that these monks were given facilities, all kinds of facilities. There was a monk who reached Nanjing, and he was, the way they used to chant the sutras, the mantras, was so fascinating and so powerful. In India, we believe that when you chant a mantra, it should be very correctly pronounced. There should not be any change even of a sound or making it long. For example, sometimes if you chant Gayatri mantra, sometimes people chant some words that they chant in a way that it is too long. Making any word too long or any vowel too long is not right. So when they reached China and this style reached China, they were so fascinated. They called it Fan Bei. Fan is Brahman. Brahmanic Patha, when you translate it. So it's the tonal melody of the Indian monks chanting the scriptures. That was so interesting for the Chinese, and it has reached Japan also. In Japan, it is so popular. Shomyo, it is called Shomyo chanting, and Buddhist chanting. It's very popular in China. We once, I think ICCR had invited these Japanese monks for chanting Shomyo, for doing the Shomyo chanting. So during the period of Wu state, this Chengdu became a capital, and I have been to a couple of times to Chengdu, and Chengdu is a wonderful place. Most important, when I went there to the monastery, especially to the Wenshu and the Dashi monastery, they are in the city, and on one side you just are in a very beautiful, peaceful atmosphere in the monastery, and just when you get out of the monasteries, it's all modern with huge buildings and markets and so on. So when Indian envoys reached there during the reign of the Wu state, they gave details of Indian kings and also kingdoms, and talked about Buddhism, how it was flourishing there, and Yeah, he was also Sangha. There was another monk in the 3rd century who reached China. The translation of his name is still not acceptable because it's controversial, but we call it Surata Paripricha. So he was also appointed as Rajaguru. Bodhidharma, yes. Another monk who went to China and became so famous until today because he established the Chan, because all the Chan monasteries, Chan is Dhyana. Dhyana in India is Chan in China and Song in Korea and Zen in Japan. So the Dhyana, the text on Dhyana were translated into Chinese, and again it was so much fascination for them that they translated this text and started meditating. But when Bodhidharma reached there, Bodhidharma denied to give any credit to building monasteries, temples and reading the sutras, because he believed in enlightenment based on self-realization, not by reading sutras or by teachings, by sermons given by others. So the emperor was so angry with him, he couldn't stay there. He was in Nanjing. He couldn't stay there. He had to leave the capital immediately, because before that, all the emperors, they were so much fascinated. They were showing that their gratefulness, their devotion through building the monasteries and translating the sutras, sponsoring them, inviting monks, but he said no, nothing. So he could not stay there. Another important point that fascinated the Chinese emperor was the concept of Ahimsa. When there was a monk, his name is Gunavarman, when he reached there, he talked about the concept of Ahimsa, and he told the emperor that he should be compassionate to the masses. He should be looking after them with a compassionate heart. So this was something new for the Chinese mind. So he was much impressed, and he built a special temple for him so that he could deliver sermons. First he was accommodated inside the his palace, and later a special monastery was built for him. Then another thing that impressed the Chinese was rain invoking ceremony. As Krishna in Bhagavad Gita has said, when there is yajna, then there is rain. When there is rain, then there is anna. Then there is vegetation. So yajna can be helpful for performance of rain, for having rain. I don't know how much is we have retained the knowledge and how much we are doing it. Although we did it in March, and we are trying to have our scientific results of the scientific mapping, that how it had an impact of the atmosphere and how this can be done even today. But there is a long history in China, and there are many monks who could perform the rain invoking ceremonies successfully. Whenever there was drought, they were invited and they were performing that. So it was another reason why. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you some. This is a monastery from Nanjing. I'm sorry, my photographs from Nanjing are not that good because I have never been to Nanjing. So this is one. You can see on this side is the pagoda. Sorry, one side is the pagoda, on the other side you can see how people are offering prayers and burning incense in front of the hall. And there, whenever you reach a Chinese temple or a monastery, you will see a huge, in India you can call it a dhupa patra. Another monastery. Here you see the Mahavira Hall. It's very important to know that Chinese were not only building halls of worship for the Buddhas or other deities or Brahma or Indra or Vairochan and other forms, but also for the soldiers who fought for the country. So it is called Mahavira Hall. Other deities inside this the hall you can see is Vairochana. Vairochana is the Buddha of immeasurable light. He is the Buddha of light, and on the two sides are Brahma and Indra. Brahma and Indra are the lords of the earth and heaven. Indra is the lord of heaven and Brahma is the lord of earth. And when you go to all these countries, you will see that concept still survives. We believe in the divine aspect of the earth and heaven and earth, Dyava Prithvi. So Dyoshpita Prithvi Mata, it is said in the Vedas that we worship the heaven, the Akash as father and the earth as mother. So that concept is there still, and there are temples dedicated to, I'm coming to it in Beijing. There are two most important temples. One is the Temple of Heaven and the other is the Temple of Earth. So I'm coming to it. This is again from Nanjing. It's these are caves, very small, but these are dedicated to 1,000 Buddhas. When these texts were translated, it is an impact of the text that the immeasurable power of the Buddha. They all over the Mahayana Buddhist world, you can see the concept of 1,000 Buddhas. Wherever you go, even in China, in Japan, or you go to Korea, or you go to even the Lamaist world, Mongolia, Tibet, everywhere. So this is another temple. This is Jimang. It is the entrance. See how beautifully they have built the entrance. And at the entrance, normally you will see there are two lions. So when you go up, this is the entrance. This is the main temple of the Jimang Monastery. See, the stupa there is called pagoda. So you can see the pagoda behind, and there is a hall behind. Normally, pagodas are built in 5 stories. They represent the 5 elements: Prithvi, up, Tej, Vayu and Akash. The earth, the fire, air, water and ether. So these are the 5 elements of which this 5-feet body is built, and finally it goes back to those 5 elements. So these 5 stories of the pagodas are a symbol of the 5 elements. And they are basically, they were built for preserving the relics. Later on, yes, of course, beautiful pagodas are built. So, this is the Jimang pagoda behind. This is another temple. It is Lingu Temple. And inside the temples, you will see huge bells. The bells are very important historically because there are inscriptions. Sometimes there are engravings on the bells. So bells were rung not only to invite the monks, but it also, like in India we say dharma bheri. So the drum towers and bell towers are built all over East Asia to have this dharma, the propagation of the sound of the dharma. Here is a bell tower from Nanjing. There are a number of bell towers there. So this is also a very important temple. I would like to draw special attention to this temple, which is a rare temple to calm the sea. And it is dedicated to the goddess of sea. In India, we have Somnath temple. What is Somnath? Lord Shiva, he is adorned with a crescent of moon, because moon has an impact on the oceanic waves. So when we travel by sea, we have to look for the peaceful waves in the ocean so that the journey is not turbulent. So whenever people were traveling, not only for spiritual purposes, but a large number of traders were traveling, leaving these sea coasts and reaching there. So they required such kind of a deity whom they could offer prayers so that sea is calm when they travel. Later on, there is a bodhisattva called Kuan Yin in Chinese of pacifying the sea. There are a number of deities that are developed in China. Originally, they are not Indian, I would say. They have developed their own concepts on the basis of the requirements. For example, there is a Kuan Yin that is worshipped for the protection of horses. There is a Kuan Yin that is worshipped for having good number of and good quality of fish. He is called Fish Basket Kuan Yin. So this is something similar here. I like the concept very much that the goddess of sea is worshipped and the name of the temple is Temple of the Calm Sea. Another temple, Jinhai. Then let's come to Chang'an. Chang'an was a great center, was a metropolitan city. It was a large number of people were traveling and staying there because although Chang'an, some scholars don't accept that Chang'an was the beginning, the starting point of Silk Route, because Beijing was already there and people were traveling up to Beijing. But there are many routes that connect Chang'an. Recently, there is an archaeologist in Xi'an who has worked on, there was a team that went to explore the route from Lhasa to Xi'an. So there were many routes going to Chang'an. Chang'an was a capital during the rule of 13 dynasties, so that all that details I gave during the earlier lecture when I was talking about the tombs built in Chang'an, in modern Xi'an. So it was a city where foreign envoys were coming, overseas scholars, students, entrepreneurs, businessmen, all kinds of people were there, and different types of religions. The spiritual systems were preached there: Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, Buddhism, and there were a number of scholars coming to study from Japan and Korea also, and the Indians who were going there, staying there, so they could talk. It was an point where it was a city where all these people were staying together, coming from Iran, coming from India, coming from Japan, Korea, studying there. So there are been many interesting stories about all these monks, how they met Indian monks in Chang'an. Chang'an is an amazing city, built in a very planned way. It's built on a grid pattern with 9 roads crossing, and very well planned. This is a gate of the Xi'an city. It's still there, and people could, So slowly, when these monks were traveling and translating the sutras, as I said, new sutras were translated and people became fascinated to know about them, and with the philosophy of those sutras, the new sects were developed, and these the special monasteries were built for these special sects also, and they were built also to commemorate the founders of these sects. For example, Avtansaka Sutra. For example, there is a sect that, you see, all these texts which were traveling, they had a great impact on the lives of the Chinese because of establishing these sects. For example, Pure Land sect, it gives a very simple path. It shows a very simple path, Anybody who chants the name of Amitabha, called Amidofu in Chinese, anybody who chants the mantra of Amidofu, he can be saved by the grace of Amitabha. In Amitabha's paradise, they have painted beautifully 9 categories of people. Normally we have 3 categories: lower, middle and higher, but they have divided all these categories again into 3, so bringing the number to 9. So Amitabha is said to be the savior of all the 9 standards or sections or qualities of the people, and he can save them, and they can go enter the paradise of Amitabha called Sukhavati. So a large number of monasteries were built on the for enshrining the statues of Amitabha. Similarly, when Dhyana became popular, then many monasteries were built for Dhyana. They are all called Chan, and the most important is the Shaolin Monastery, where Bodhidharma went. He stayed there. He meditated for 9 years. 9 years he meditated there, and when he got up, his limbs were not working. That is why a limbless Bodhidharma called Daruma in Japan is still worshipped, and there are special rituals to worship Bodhidharma in the Daruma form. And beautiful dolls can be found outside the Japanese monasteries. So there was a master who was known for his, and he was given a posthumous title, that is Samadhi Prajna Dhyana Acharya. So these acharyas, these teachers, these masters were very famous, and still they are immortal, because many of them can be seen inside the caves. Also, I will talk next lecture. I am planning to talk about caves, how their paintings are done inside the caves. So now we come to the city Chang'an and the modern city Xi'an. Here you can see a relic of Buddha, finger bone relic, that is preserved there in this Famen monastery, and on the other side the figure is identified as a bodhisattva, but my identification and many other scholars agree that this is actually Emperor Ashoka's figure, because it is said that Emperor Ashoka sent 19 relics, Buddha's relics, to China. Not all of them are surviving, a few survive. This is one of them, and how beautifully, how with so much of devotion they have kept it. There was a stupa built to preserve this relic. This is the original stupa. You can see how with time it is tilted, and finally it fell down, and when it fell down they discovered a palace, underground palace. A huge underground palace was discovered. This is a photograph of the palace. Again, because I took it from behind the glass, so the it's not that good. And you can see the door of the palace was too small to enter, just around 3 feet, I think. When you enter such kind of places, one has to bow down. In Japan, there is still a tradition that when you enter a Zen monastery, you have to just leave all your ego behind. Just bend down and crawl into it. And on this, what you see are the guardians. These are the Buddhist guardians. There are many categories of Buddhist guardians. This is one of them, that are outside on the 2 sides, like doorkeepers. So here you can see the stupa that was built for Xuanzang. When Xuanzang went back to China, then he was given a grand welcome. All the people, they wanted to see what he has brought from India, all the scriptures, the relics, the statues, whatever he had taken from India. They had organized a huge procession. All the monasteries were called to come. They all came with their banners, the beautiful flags fluttering, and all the streets were beautifully decorated. And according to one of their chronicles, that people were falling on each other. There was such a huge crowd, and the emperor wanted Xuanzang, wanted to talk to him. He wanted to understand what he has brought from India, why it is so fascinating, because it was so fascinating for him. He built a, Xuanzang wanted to stay somewhere away from the hustle and bustle of the city life. And this special pagoda was built for him, for keeping everything that he had brought from India. He wanted to make a building with stone so that it cannot be damaged by fire. And there were special halls for keeping the relics of the Buddhist masters. And the emperor and the prince both wrote, the emperor wrote a foreword to the, because as soon as Xuanzang reached there, emperor asked him, he talked a lot about what is written in the Buddhist scriptures, what is that, it is so important. He said, all these scriptures are meant for the state. So they naturally, the emperor was so much impressed by this, and he wrote a. Whenever a text was translated, it was not just a work of a single person, but they were not done individual at the individual level, but there was a huge group of monks who used to sit and discuss each and every word, how it should be translated. So when it was final, the emperor wrote forward. Then again, the prince wrote another forward to the translations of done by Xuanzang, and they engraved them on steles to make the immortal. So those stelae are also there in this stupa. Here is the huge procession. Maybe you can just see how it was. You can just have an idea about it. Again, because of the I had to take this picture from behind glass, so there is so much reflection. So that kind of procession was there. It was for a few kilometers only. There are a number of beautiful things preserved, items preserved, the cultural relics that are the most important relics of Indo-Chinese cultural relations. Here you can see these are the 5 seed syllables written in Sanskrit. On the top is A, in between is Va, and down below you can see Hra. You can read it. It is the 6th, 7th century style of our writing in the Indian script. So now this is the huge monastery that is built there, where this Buddha's relic, finger bone relic, is kept. See how much one has to walk. There is another monastery very famous that is dedicated to the great master Kumarajiva. I have given enough about, talked enough about Kumarajiva. This is one of the very famous monasteries dedicated to the memory of Kumarajiva. The name of the monastery is Kautangsi, and here what you see is the stupa inside the small hall, and the relics of Kumarajiva are kept here. And when we reached there, they were building a huge hall to commemorate where that Kumarajiva used to sit and translate here with around 3,000-4,000 monks. This is the Tayanta pagoda that was built for Xuanzang. And inside this, now it is not just the pagoda, there are many things inside, many halls also. So here you can see how the life of the Buddha is depicted. And it's so wonderful to know that this is not done by any colors, but it's done by jade. And it is real jade no artificial coloring is used. See? There is another hall where there was a large number of Buddhist sculptures inside. This is the way they dance. So there is another temple that is called Fa Yuan Temple. Fa Yuan Temple, the name, if you translate it, is means the temple of Dharmodaya, the emergence of the Dharma, not only emergence but also to preservation of Dharma. There are temples, such temples in Japan also. Horyuji also called the Dharmodaya temple. So, inside the Fa Yuan, you can see beautiful images. On one side you can see a Vairochana, and below him are the 4 Buddhas, and below him are the 1000 Buddhas. And on the other side you can see a modern statue of Manjushri. These are also sculptures from taken from from inside the Fa Yuan temple. It's a beautiful and very important temple in China. Still people sit there, just chant the sutras, and because it's because of their devotion to Buddhism. On the other side you can see there is a stone and a scripture is engraved on it. In China there was so much passion for the Buddhist sutras that they engraved a large number of sutras, and they still exist. Many of them still exist. They are put in a place in Xi'an that is called the Forest of Inscriptions. So that is another temple. It is called Forest of Inscriptions, and such concept exists in almost all the East Asian countries, and also in Southeast Asia. Recently I was in Vietnam, and also there they have named this the Temple of Literature, because they have all such kinds of stone slabs engraved. And one thing was to preserve them, and the other idea was that anybody who wants this sutra could come and take a stampage. There are special arrangements for making stampages for the people. I'm just trying to, I think, hurry up. These are a few photographs from the same Fa Yuan temple in Beijing. This is High Stupa, and I would like to draw your attention to there is a Sanskrit seed syllable written, and it's like a, can you see that here? It's a Sanskrit seed syllable written here in the, and it is written in a way as if it is enshrined in a temple, like they have made it like a shrine. And the angle of this stupa is built in such a way that the emperor could sit in his palace and could have looked at it. This is a temple of heaven. I talked about temple of heaven and earth. This is the temple of heaven. This is how you enter there, and outside there are gates, and this is how you can go up the temple. This is how the ceiling in one of the halls, it was built during the Ming period. And whenever you go to a Chinese or any of the East Asian temples, you will see the vermilion color is used for painting the pillars abundantly. This is another hall where they have put up the tablets. Another hall. Yeah. I wanted to show you that how they have built small shrines also for offering prayers. This is called their mountain Immortals temple, means it is on a mountain for worshipping the immortals. See, all these tiles have reached China from this kind of desert. All sand. Just a small monastery. When we reach there, first thing we have to do is they will give you shoes, because you can't walk without them. and how these people were traveling and carrying all these things. This is Eun-Joo Temple, beautiful. As I said, the natural beauty is also really fascinating in this kind of temples. Eun-Joo is said to be, they have translated it as cloud dwelling monastery, because it's very difficult to translate from Chinese into any of the languages, but when we compare it with the Sanskrit names and Sanskrit ideas and concepts, then it is translated as Mahamegha Samadhi. You see, we in India have a number of types of samadhis, number of techniques to attain that samadhi, and one of them is Megha, Mahamegha. So I don't know how do they do it, how it was done, but what I feel is, but this maybe I may be wrong, but what I feel is that when in samadhi one can see only the clouds. So maybe, but it is a huge complex. So I just I'm showing you just the plan of the of this monastery. This is Eun-Joo, another beautiful, beautiful monastery. And inside the monasteries, you can see this kind of huge statues of Buddhas, of Bodhisattvas. These are the wish bands. People even today, they go, they visit these monasteries, and whenever they have any wish, and again you can see this this idea in Indian temples. You go to Kalkaji Mandir, or you go to Chhatrapur Temple, people go and tie something, and when the wish is fulfilled, then they bring that back home. So something similar is there. Inside the Eun-Joo, it's beautifully not only decorated, there are seats. Here you can see the seats for the monks, the statues that are placed there. And Eun-Joo is famous because of a monk who engraved all the Buddhist sutras on stone slabs quietly, secretly. And one after the other, his disciples, other monks, they carried on, and for a few centuries this work went on. And here you can see some of the stone slabs engraved by these monks, and inside it's full of so many scriptures, so many statues, paintings, and you can have an idea about the history and all these things. This is another temple. It's in Beijing. It's called Five Pagoda because of the 5 shikharas. Because in China maybe they do not understand the concept of shikhara. It is based on the style of the Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya. In many countries such temples were built. This is from China, and very important that I would like to talk about is that they have built this temple on a platform very specially built with a number of not only the engraved statues, but also there is a Buddhist sutra engraved on the base of the temple. We in India, we have the concept of Sumeru mountain, and we say that all the gods, all the deities, they reside on Mount Meru. So Mount Meru plays an important role, and here in the temples also, many of the temples are built on Mount Meru. These are the walls, as I said, Buddhas and other deities, and the Buddhist symbols, and this is the gate. This is the Kala Mukha. I'm sorry that we don't have time so much to discuss about how Kala is drawn or painted or engraved on the wall, on the entrance. These are the Buddhas there from Five Pagoda. There are many types of Buddhas. On this side you can see 2 Buddhas sitting almost not exactly face to face, but turned to each other. This is the Buddha of this Shakyamuni, and the other is Prabhut Ratna. What is the meaning of Prabhut? Prabhut means abundance, and Ratna is gems. So how we have been worshipping, even in Buddhism, the 2 Buddhas together, Prabhut Ratna and Shakyamuni. This is Chietai, another very beautiful monastery in Beijing, away from the busy life of the city. And also, one of my friends, she was traveling and visiting these Beijing monasteries, and she told me that because I said Indian music had traveled to China and they have still preserved it. She went to a monastery where every day they play that music just to perform, just to preserve it. Very fascinating the stories are there. Somebody, I think, one by one, temple by temple, monastery by monastery. We have to see what is the contribution in India and how it is still surviving, how it is still living there. Here you can see a huge pot. It's made of maybe of 7 saptadhatu or of bronze. I'm not sure, but I just saw and took this photo. And you can see Sanskrit seed syllables engraved on this in gold, painted gold. Gold is very important and all over the sacred, we can say, in the sacred space, gold plays a very important role. So, this is also from Chetai Temple, how people come and tie the wish bands here. Another, see how many people visit. So we can see the faith of the people in Beijing. Although Beijing is a modern city, looks so Western, but the faith of the people, the mind of the people, the soul of the people is reflected in this kind of wish bands. And something interesting, in Beijing I saw that when I was talking about wish bands, when they go to the Great Wall of China, Great Wall of China was built for protection of the nation. And now what the people do, they take locks and put those locks. There are special some pipes are there they have put up, and on those pipes they put locks. And what I felt after looking at those thousands of locks, that the people offer these locks for security, for safety of their houses or for themselves. And on that Great Wall of China, I told earlier also that the Sanskrit Dharani of Ushnish Vidya is still written there. It was written in 14th century, it still exists. But thousands of people who go and see the Great Wall of China, they are not told about it. Also from Chetai, look at the pagoda, the Buddhist relics where they have preserved. This is on one side you can see where the relics actually are preserved, and the other side is just an engraving on the outside wall of the stupa. Such paintings are there. This painting shows the exact plan of the monastery, and also you can see Buddha coming down from the heaven with the blessings, and how people are bowing down below, receiving him. So there are a large number of statues there inside the monastery. This is 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin with 1,000 arms. Only 42 major arms are normally carved. The rest of the arms are just taken as symbols. This is Tanze Temple. See how beautiful it, how peaceful it looks when you enter this. This is also Tanze. Many of the monasteries are up, as I said, on the mountains. Look at the stairs. One has to walk up. You see, these places are not just for joy, they are places of pilgrimage. So more you struggle to reach a place of pilgrimage, more merit you get. And scientifically also, it is being proven, and many people are working on that in India, basically the temples were built especially on ley lines which are energy lines. And when you go to an ancient temple, not the modern one, in modern times you can build temples anywhere, but in the ancient temples are real centers of energy, and you can get that divine energy only when you are exhausted. So to be exhausted is very important to get the cosmic energy or the divine energy. So this is a modern statue. Still people offer such statues, offer clothes to them, offer prayers to them. Again, everywhere you will see these wish bands being offered by people. This is Tansei. This is another temple, Guanji. Everywhere you will see the monks and also the lay people. This is also Guanji. See? So much devotion. Look into the eyes of the people. Like India, there are so many things sold outside the temple so that you can buy as souvenirs, you can buy as offerings inside the temple. There is another very important temple in Beijing that is called Yunghokung. Yunghokung was built by the Mongolians, so it's a Tibetan style of temple. Inside the Yunghokung there are huge statues. This is one of them. There is a group of 4 guardians which you can see all over East Asia inside the temple. They are not standing outside. There were 2 that I showed you in the outside the gate of the underground palace, like that. So there is another group that is of 4 divine, we call it guardian kings. So again, everywhere in China you will see that scriptures are engraved on the stones, and this is the main monastery of Yunghokung. I think finish. So thank you very much. I shall be happy if you have some questions and I can answer them. Thank you very much.
These are fascinating photographs. Fascinating photographs. Many of us would not have seen this, but I think some interesting points also came up, and you very clearly showed that there is a lot of similarity